Hey super friends, thanks for joining me again, and this video is video number 3 in the seed starting series. It's actually going to have two main purposes. The first one is an update on what the plants look like now and what they should look like when they're about ready to go out into the garden. So when you have, if you were following along to start seeds for yourself, you know what they're going to look like. Or the second purpose is if you were following along to see what they would look like for the plant sale, to also know what having a plant sale actually looks like. So it's kind of documentary style. I showed you in the beginning, where I buy my materials, the seed starting schedule I put together, how I stick to it, etc., what it should look like along the way, how I transplant, and now the end, again, an update on what they should look like by now, and then what having a plant sale is actually like and what that actually looks like. So, yeah, those of you who follow me either on Facebook or Instagram, I'm sure you know that last Friday we actually had the plant sale, and so I want to share with you the footage on what that looks like and how that went. So let's go ahead and do that footage now. Okay, so here we are frantically trying to set up the plant sale because there's always early birds. I put that it was going to start at 9 o'clock and 8:35, 8:40, somewhere in there, somebody started showing up. So anyway, I do have a sunshade so that the plants won't wilt in the sun. And then I have this tray, hopefully you can see it. I have all my tomato plants. Some of them have been beaten up by the wind a little bit, unfortunately. And so here we have all of those, lots and lots. Then over here we have our peppers, which are a little smaller than I would prefer, but I did the best I could, I suppose. So we have sweet peppers, we have spicy peppers, we have some eggplants. Then on this side back here, we have a bunch of boxes so people can pick out, their plants and take them home without having to take my trays so that I can reuse them. My prices, same as always, $1.50 for tomatoes and everything else is $1. And then tomato, eggplant, and pepper 6-packs are free, or I'm giving them away to anybody who would like to have a garden but doesn't have the money to do so. So these are the plants that are extra small. As you can see, these tomatoes aren't quite as big as the others, but you do get 6 of them for $1 or free. So pretty decent, I say. These are the cucumbers, regular slicing cucumbers. We have some summer squash, some pickling cucumbers, some watermelon, and then some winter squash down there at the bottom, and then just a little bit of kale and spinach. So that's all we have this year. I usually do herbs, but that's all. And so now I need to go quick put up my signage before anybody else comes. But I'll let you know how it goes. This is all we have left. That's it. Right there. We sold out of everything else. So here's the stack of all the trays of empty that were once filled with plants this morning. That's quite a stack of trays. And they're all completely empty. And now even these ones, while they still have plants, are almost all out. So obviously it did, I would say, pretty well, although there really isn't a whole lot left. At the same time, there's enough to be like, I don't know, not sure what I'm going to do with the rest of them. So anyway, there you have it. I consolidated it all down to just this one shelving unit. This morning it was 3 shelving units plus a table, all stuffed full. So yeah, end of the first day, and I had another second day planned for the sale, but I think I'm going to go ahead and cancel it because with this few of plants to sell, almost nobody stops to look at them. They want large, amounts to choose from, and when it gets this low, everybody knows they're picked over. So yeah, I'm going to call this probably the end of the actual plant sale. Okay, so there you go. This is actually the 3rd year I've had a plant sale, and I've learned a lot over the time, over those 3 years. So, I'd like to share some reflections on what I've learned. And for those of you who've been following along to see what the plants have, are supposed to look like, hopefully you saw pretty well in there what they look like and whatnot, with the exception of the fact that, a few of them were a little smaller than I would have preferred. Sometimes when the weather gets cold, plants need warmth to start, and so in order to germinate. So one of the tricks I use is I actually use a heating pad, and so some of them I was waiting to see if they would germinate, and then they didn't germinate at the time when I wanted them to, so I would throw the heating pad under there, and then they got started, but then they were already a little bit behind, but that's okay. It really didn't make a big difference. A lot of people still like them anyway. I've planted them a little bit smaller in my own garden, and they'll still get, going, and there won't be any issues whatsoever. That's another reason why my plants were windblown. is actually because I try to harden my plants off. The greenhouses don't do this because when you put them outside, the plants can get like bugs and they can get, like windblown, like I said, and they can start to lean over to the side to try to reach for the light and things like that. And so, to keep them looking pretty, they'll go ahead and just sell them the way they are, having lived in a greenhouse for their whole life. The problem with that is if they're not used to the cold temperatures at night, the full sun in the day, they can actually wilt and they can die and, things can go wrong with them. So hardening off is actually a really important portion of the seed starting schedule and planting schedule. And so that's actually the phase where I'm at with mine now. I've been hardening them off. I did do some hardening off before I sold them at the plant sale. Even though it makes them a little less, pretty, it makes it to where the people who buy them hopefully will have better success, because those who don't know about hardening off, they're already pre-hardened off. They can plant them in their garden and they won't have any issues. So yeah, that's why I go ahead and choose to do it myself. But anyway, again, it does make them a little less pretty, but they're actually better off that way, in my opinion. But yeah, there's a lot of things I've learned over this one. It was a really warm day the day I did it, and so I learned that I really need to make sunscreen before the plant sale because you can in fact get sunburnt in May. So I need to remember that for next year. I just need to expect early birds. The first year I had the plant sale was actually the video I put out. I already have a video out on how that one went, but that was my first year doing it. So I was kind of videotaping it as, I was kind of experimenting with everything. So yeah. Last year, the first year I had early birds, last year I had early birds, as you saw. This year I had early birds, so I just need to expect that to be the case and get everything set up even a half an hour before I say the start time is, just in expectation of that happening. So I had my first negotiator this year. Yeah, I don't know why. My prices were already really reasonable. I was charging, as you saw, $1.50 per plant, and somebody wanted to know if they could get 4 for $5, which basically makes the plants $1.25 each. And while I'm all for negotiating, personally I think maybe it's better suited to when things aren't being priced reasonably to begin with, and you want to, push the price down into a reasonable category. But I had lots of people there at the time when he was trying to negotiate, and everyone else was paying my prices happily. So I very politely said no without telling him no. I just told him, actually I think my prices are pretty reasonable. And so he went ahead and paid my full prices. But that one was a new one for me this year. I've never had a negotiator at my plant sale. I would definitely plan for, if you were to have a plant sale, for it to be better weather. Because in years past, I've had them on days when it was sunny and warm, and then other days when it was kind of drizzly, rainy, or cold. And the cold definitely keeps people away from your plant sale. So I would highly recommend, if you have the ability to, squeeze it in your schedule somehow, or hopefully you have a schedule where you can kind of make it work. I know not everybody does, you have only the weekends to work with and whatnot, and if the weather doesn't cooperate, that really stinks. But yeah, for best success, I would highly recommend trying to plan it on a day, when it's going to be warm, if you can. So yeah, a lot of, things I learned this year, and, some really cool things happened too. I had someone from a local big farm come. They're a nonprofit farm. They're a missionary farm, so they have people who come, work on the farm as their pay to stay there, and then they do their missionary work and stuff like that. And so he had some issues starting some seeds on his own for his farm, and they were kind of struggling to figure out how they were going to make a profit this year without having, seedlings that were far enough along. So he came to my plant sale, and the manager of the farm, and he came and bought almost $100 worth of plants. So I thought that was really cool. I got to help a big farm out, and that definitely helped make it to where I had less leftovers, which is another thing you might want to keep in mind if you do choose a plant sale. Have some sort of a plan on what to do with the leftovers. The first year, as you saw in the other video, I had someone, I actually took them to a reclaimed building supply store, and they bought all my leftovers. Last year I found someone on Craigslist who had some land and was looking for some plants to plant because he wanted to use some of his, free time to grow plants to actually donate the produce to local food banks. We have a pretty high level of demand for that sort of thing here in my area. And so, we have an affordable housing crisis. As the rents have gone up, homelessness has also increased from people not being able to, find affordable places to live, which is really unfortunate. So, as much as I would love to welcome people here to Colorado, if you're thinking of moving to Colorado, especially northern Colorado, I would reconsider, because the housing prices are really high here and we're already so full, we're busting at the seams. So, but that's a totally different topic. But anyway, so he was going to grow some food and stuff to donate to the local food banks because there is such a high demand for that, and I thought that was great. So instead of selling them, I donated them to him last year, and hopefully that worked out well. And this year I really, as you saw, wanted to donate some 6-packs to people who would otherwise maybe not be able to afford to garden. And so I was really hoping for that to happen, and it didn't. So, but I made up for it by giving away the extras on Craigslist, and so hopefully most of the people who came and got them, you know, were people who really needed it. I got to talk to one person who came and picked them up, and that sounded like the case from his perspective at least. So that was cool. Yeah, if you do have a plant sale, you may be wanting to consider trying to find some sort of a plan B on what to do with the leftovers, or just have something in mind, because that's something, you know, there's no way you're going to sell out of all of them, because once they get down to a certain level and there just isn't as many to choose from, you end up getting less customers and whatnot. So, you know, you'll definitely want to have something to do with the leftovers. So yeah, and then of course my highlight of actually what happened at the plant sale, it's actually not the money, wait, that's going to be the last thing. But the thing I was actually most excited about was that a subscriber friend showed up to my plant sale, and I was actually really excited about this because she said that I inspired her to want to not only start seeds, of course, because she did last year also, but also to have a plant sale of her own. So I asked her what her seed starting experience was. She said she did some of it when she was a kid, and then she didn't really do much of it, and now that she's, you know, an adult, she did some last year, and then she did it, you know, on a little bit bigger of a scale this year so that she could actually have some as a plant sale. So remember my first video, I invited you to come along and to do a plant sale with me. Well, she actually did it. So she came to my plant sale. She had her plant sale the very next day, and so I came to hers. It was really cool. It was really exciting to see, you know, some of this stuff becoming, you know, bigger. Something that was actually like able to be, you know, I don't know how to describe it. It was actually cool to see something I was teaching actually materialize in real life, and she did a great job. She let me take some pictures of the, you know, stuff that she actually produced, and like I said, she did a great job. So let me go ahead and roll that slideshow of the job that she did right now. Didn't she do a great job? Those plants looked really good. It took me years to actually get that good at, you know, starting seeds, and so I was really happy for her for being able to do it so soon in her, you know, life. So anyway, yeah, those of you who maybe are wondering, you know, isn't it too hard to start seeds? Isn't it really complicated? Maybe, you know, I'm just making it sound, you know, easier than it really is. You know, hopefully seeing her plants can encourage you, because she, you know, like I said, she didn't have a whole lot of experience before this, you know, again, as a kid, you know, just one time last year, and then bumping it up to even having enough at the plant sale. And when I took those pictures, she actually had already started her plant sale, and she was selling plants, and I was there when she had other customers buying them, and so you saw some of the plants missing, you know, from the trays and stuff like that, because they were selling, and so it was going, you know, in my opinion, pretty well. So yeah, if you were, you know, worried about if it was, you know, going to work out or whatnot, hopefully you can see that, you know, even somebody with maybe, you know, not a whole lot of experience actually did a really good job and produced some really nice looking plants, and it was working out great for her. So, you know, you can do it too. So anyway, I'm sure the last thing you want to hear about is the plant sale numbers, and so let's go ahead and go into the plant sale numbers now, what we actually sold, and then how much, you know, profit we made, etc. So on the day of the plant sale, I actually did $360 in sales, and then I got a $45 credit from the big farm for plants that produce, because he sells at the farmer's market. He grows produce and then sells at the farmer's market. He gave me $45 in credit in exchange for my plants. So I've added that in, which means I made $405 on the plant sale. And now it is important to note that I did scale things back this year. I started about a third less plants. You know, I had my plant sale on one day instead of two, and so, you know, I eliminated some things that I was growing. I scaled way back on the greens. I didn't grow any herbs for the plant sale. I grew some just for my own personal use, but as you can see, I scaled it back from what I usually do, and the amount that I'm selling is going to be lower because of that. The numbers on how much I'm actually, you know, going to be able to make is, of course, lower. So $405 in sales, and of course I have expenses, and so I spent $25 on potting soil. I spent $26 on seeds, but I didn't really keep track of which seeds I was actually using for the plant sale and what seeds I was actually using for my own personal home use, and so I think at least $5 or $8 worth of those seeds weren't seeds I used at the plant sale. But again, I didn't track my expenses as well as I should have, but I'll go ahead and use the whole $26 on the seeds that I spent. I got them buy one get one free at Home Depot, which helped reduce the cost, and then I also had some seeds in my fridge from last year that I utilized, and so that helped keep the cost down. And then all of the equipment that I used, the trays, the inserts and things, were all ones I either reused from last year. I had a few leftovers from when I purchased last year, because the Greenhouse Mega Store, where I talked about in my first video where I order my stuff, they only sell them in packages of 10. So if I ordered some and I only used, you know, 4 or 5 or 6, you know, I used the balance and only used the 4 of the inserts that I didn't use last year. So all of the equipment basically that I used this year was all scrounged and then again reused or leftovers, and so I didn't have to buy any this year except for $3 worth, because even, you know, saving up as many as I could and trying to find all the ones that I could, I did run just a little bit short, so I went to the Dollar Tree and then I bought $3 worth of pots just to make it to where I had enough. So which that means I had $54 worth of expenses. So when you take that away from the $405 in sales I did, that means I turned about a $350 profit this year, which is definitely worth it if you consider that I really didn't spend that much time doing it. I spent about 8 hours of actual work doing it, 4 hours of setting stuff up and then cleaning up, because after we did the whole thing with my kids, which by the way, they spent about 6 hours each, and I have 2 kids, so there's another 12 hours there. Watering, seed starting, transplanting, everything. That's how much actual time we spent doing it. But also, I kept 5 trays of plants that I started for myself, and then my brother took a whole tray too. So we had 6 trays of plants that we got basically for free, and I made $350 in profit. So there you go. Hopefully that gave you all the information that you need to see, you know, seed starting is actually a pretty useful skill. It's a good way to, you know, help make some money if you're ready for that sort of thing. And even if not, if you're just a gardener, you know, urban homesteader or a homesteader in general, or even a farmer, it's a really useful skill to do. It can help make you more self-sufficient, and the plants that you produce are actually healthier because, you know, you don't spray them with the chemicals that they use in the big box stores. So there you go. Hopefully that was helpful to you and encouraging that you can do it too. I'm Frugal Green Girl. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.